Hello, techies. Welcome to the Tech Times Africa podcast, where we'll bring you the latest stories on tech and startups in Africa. Catch us every Thursday at 10 a.m. WAT on techtimesafrica.podbean.com. Let us know what you think by giving us feedback in the comments or on our socials. Now, on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tech Times Africa podcast. This week, we have a number of interesting topics. Before that, Karen, how are you doing?
Hi, Kelvin. I'm doing great. I'm excited for today. As you've said, we have some really interesting topics, some really cool things happening in other markets outside of Kenya and Nigeria. So I'm looking forward to getting into that.
Yeah. So we'll start with Jumia. Jumia is predicting profitability by 2027. Looking at some of the reports, they are cutting their losses more and more. We've seen that over the last year, and they are on that journey where they are still trying to cut back their losses, even though their stock price in the US is quite low at the moment. But they are still optimizing everything to profitability, and based on the current timeline, they believe they will achieve that by 2027. 2027 is not far, so I'm like, if they are able to do that, maybe that puts them in a very interesting spot for e-commerce. We know how challenging e-commerce is in Africa, so if they are able to pull this off, then the e-commerce market starts to look interesting in Africa. So, I'm a big fan of Jumia and I'm always rooting for Jumia, right? So I am hopeful that they do achieve this profitability in the time they are estimating.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's a very bold move, especially when you look at how they've performed in the first quarter. Their revenue went down by 26%. However, even with that, we're seeing that their orders are increasing and they have pivoted from markets that are not making them money, and they're now focusing on markets that are actually making them money. And I think that's a good lesson for any startup founder. It's important to focus on data. A lot of the times you may be in a market that you really love, but it's clearly not working for you. You may be having products that you really love, but they're really not working for your business. So it's important to go back to the numbers and to pivot based on how you're seeing your business perform. One of the things I used to hear a lot when I worked in banking was business is cold, which is not a very nice thing to hear. But as a business owner, it's a very important thing to think about. Business is cold. You have to focus on the numbers. You cannot be emotional when it comes to doing business. Yes, absolutely, you can do things you love, but you need to be so spot on with seeing trends and accepting the trends and working with your numbers. Because if you choose to stay in places that are not performing, then it affects your business very, very negatively. So to some extent, I see that business sometimes can be cold, where you have to stick strictly to what the numbers are telling you.
All right, business is cold. I would remember that one. But yeah, it is like that. You have to always think about what is best for the business. And I tell like some of my friends and people close to me with the work they do for different companies. At the end of the day, the business has to think about the business. Yes, they can care about you. If they have nice owners, they have nice founders, they can care about you and all of that. But they always have to think about what is best for the business. And if something is not working, numbers don't lie, statistics don't lie, they don't care about feelings, they are just facts. So when the numbers don't make sense for you, then it's time to change something. And at the moment, that's what Jumia is doing. They're only thinking about what makes the business work, what makes the business profitable, and they are optimizing for those things. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out by 2027. It's not far as well, so I'm actually quite curious.
Yeah, absolutely. And because we love Jumia here, we're definitely following up on how that's going to go. So entering into fintech just a little bit, but on a very positive note, PalmPay is expanding to 4 African markets, and it has processed 1.35 billion transactions in Q1, and they are moving to South Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, Uganda, and Tanzania by the end of this year. They're going to have a footprint in 6 African countries because they have already had successful launches in Ghana and in Kenya. So this is really exciting for me. I think it's a good show. The kinds of transactions that they are focusing on as well are very exciting. We're seeing them even holding money and paying interest, which is, I think they are showing the possibilities of being successful as a fintech company in the African landscape.
Yeah, PalmPay is one that sometimes for me flies under the radar because OPay, I think, is a bit more popular in Nigeria, but PalmPay is also just as popular. I see them closer to Money Point in terms of the areas that you see them in with POS services at different shops, markets, outlets. Of course, MoneyPoint has the dominance, but I do see PalmPay as well in that space. And sometimes for me personally, I used to think that they had different product offerings from OPay, but I thought they were still the same company. So, okay, OPay is for maybe individual users and PalmPay was more focused on like the business side. At least that's what I used to think. But yeah, PalmPay is its own thing, and apparently they are quite successful. And this new expansion into other African countries is telling. I mean, I am not really invested in the company. I think they are doing great things and helping to improve accessibility to finance in Nigeria, at least at the moment. And now they are looking to expand that into other countries. So I wish them well.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen them quite much in Kenya, but they're saying that they are in the country. So I think that's going to be a place where I am more keen on, because I've seen that their mobile money is actually doing very well. 99.5% of their mobile money transactions are successful, and most of their customers perform an average of 50 transactions. And so that's a good thing. You're able to do bank transfers, you're able to do airtime purchases. So very interesting. And I'm definitely going to be following up to see how they're doing in Kenya, because I didn't even know that they were in the country until last week. So now I'm going to pay a bit more attention to what it is that they're doing in the country and how that is going.
Yeah. Moving on, Bayobab strengthens regional connectivity by unveiling of East African corridor. So the Bayobab and MTN Group is celebrating a major milestone. They are unveiling the Kenya-Uganda Railway from Mombasa to Kampala routes. I believe Karen, you'll be more familiar with what this route means. But basically what they are doing is a strategic fiber infrastructure to connect both countries. I mean, one of the things we are noticing in Africa at the moment is connectivity. We are seeing players like Starlink trying to increase connectivity, particularly in rural areas. We are seeing some partnerships between telecom companies like MTN and Airtel to boost their collective infrastructure and offer better services. So we are seeing this focus on improving connectivity in Africa, and this just looks like another step in that direction.
Yeah, I think a few weeks ago, I don't know if it was last week, when we were talking about the undersea cables that land in Lagos in Nigeria. So Mombasa in Kenya is a major landing space for the eastern side of the continent for these subsea cables. I believe Bayobab owns one. And now they have gone ahead to do some major infrastructure investments that are going to see the region's internet becoming a lot more resilient. It's going to reduce latency, and it's going to really strengthen the growth of the East African corridor. And as you know, the East African nations work together quite a lot when it comes to trade, because we're seeing a very high growth rate in Uganda and in Tanzania right now. They are running really fast behind Kenya, because Kenya has always been kind of at the forefront of development. And so I'm really excited to see this, because it's going to do a lot for the corridor in terms of how we are going to do trade together. And obviously, this is going to support regional trade, because we're going to have faster and cheaper transactions. I'm hoping to see how it will also improve cross-border payments and things like those. So I'm really excited about it. I think we're going to see fintech do a lot better between these borders as a result of this development. So very exciting to see. And it goes with the railway line. We have a shared railway that goes all the way to Uganda. So yeah, it's quite a long stretch, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it boosts digital transformation within the region.
So this railway line, and that means you can board a train from Kenya straight to Uganda, right?
Not at the moment. It's mostly for cargo.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes, it's definitely one that would improve trade. The general connectivity of the region, I believe we would see even more partnerships like this moving forward, because even one of the stories we'll talk about later on is also about connectivity. So this is a welcome development.
Absolutely, 100%. And some positive news about government agency and power. So Kenya Power is building 45 electric vehicle charging stations across 6 counties in Kenya. And it's actually very well targeted, because it's targeting the major towns in the country and the major cities. So we have Nairobi, which is a city, Kisumu, which is a city, Nakuru, which is a city, which is where I am, and Eldoret, which is a city. And then we have Nyeri Town and Taita Taveta. So it's going to be putting up charging stations for electric vehicles. And I was kind of shocked to realize that we have 9,000 registered electric vehicles in the country, although 90% of them are electric motorbikes. So very exciting to see this move towards sustainable transportation and the building of the infrastructure by the government or by a parastatal to ensure that we have the infrastructure to support this move towards sustainable transport.
Yeah. I'm curious about this particular topic because I believe over the weekend I didn't have power. I mean, if you're a Nigerian, that is not shocking. But I didn't have power, and I was thinking I have this portable inverter that you can move around with. I mean, if you have a car, it's easy to just put it in your boot and move around with it. So I was thinking, is there like an electric charging station, which is what Kenya Power is looking to build around different counties in Kenya? And I decided to check my city. I'm based in Port Harcourt in Nigeria, and see whether there are some charging stations, or just generally look for some information about that. And yeah, I found nothing. So I thought if we did have some charging stations, because Port Harcourt is a major city in Nigeria, so if electric vehicles and electric technology is now becoming more common in Nigeria, definitely they will start to make some investments like these charging stations that are meant for maybe vehicles like motorbikes and cars. But then it can also serve purposes like this, where you can use it to charge your portable inverter as well, and then just go back home. I am interested in electric vehicles now. I don't think I was interested in it previously, but now that I'm beginning to see even more applications, and then you think about sustainable energy and climate friendly energy, I believe it's one that we should all start to invest in. It's good to see Kenya Power moving in this direction.
Yeah, and I was shocked to realize that we already have 13 stations in Nairobi. I did not know that. I think I've seen one in Westlands. I didn't know there were so many. So at first I thought, these are just lies. But when I saw that 13 are already installed, it gave me some hope. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that. As you know, I own a startup in the solar energy sector. So now this is giving me a lot of ideas in terms of where the future is going and some of the things that I can do within the business. So it's a very exciting thing indeed.
Yeah, I believe that if we do have charging stations, I probably would need to check. But if we are going to have anywhere in Nigeria, it would be in Lagos most likely, and maybe Abuja, but Lagos most likely. It's taking some time to catch on. I don't know too many people that have electric vehicles. I haven't heard too many people that have electric vehicles in Nigeria. Maybe it's because I don't know a lot of people, so I may have a limited pool that I'm working with, but we'll see how this goes. All right, moving on. Connectivity. Airtel Africa and SpaceX are looking to collaborate on improving connectivity in Africa. SpaceX is the company that owns Starlink, and these companies are partnering to improve connectivity in Africa. Now, this is one I didn't see coming because I thought Starlink would be a competitor to people like Airtel. And Airtel is proving to be more of a collaborative brand at the moment, because it's a couple of weeks ago that we talked about their partnership with MTN in, I believe, Uganda. And this past week, they are now collaborating with Starlink to improve internet access, especially in rural areas. I am now more inclined to pay attention to what Airtel is doing at the moment, because they are just making moves. They are trying to improve their connectivity. They are trying to, of course, they are trying to make money as well. It's not charity they are doing, but at the same time, they are willing to work with everybody to make sure they improve their services. And I think that's a very positive one from them.
Yeah, and they're making some really smart moves if you look at it, to be honest. For example, when you look at the African market, a majority of the big towns are doing okay when it comes to connectivity. Where there's a lot of opportunity right now is rural setups. Now, when you come to a country like Kenya, where devolution is a thing, the government has certain goals to create as much opportunity within the rural areas so that we can decongest our cities. That's a smart move to make with a company that is able to actually allow you better access to connectivity with probably fewer infrastructural implications. So I feel like this is a really smart move, because the faster that the population rate is growing in Africa, the more we will see governments trying to decongest the main cities by trying to create development in the rural spaces. And that is made easier by digital transformation, and connectivity is sort of like the backbone of that development. So this is a really smart move. I agree with you. I'm also starting to realize that Airtel is becoming a very worthy competitor in the connectivity space in Africa, and they're making some moves that are just, as you said, shocking. I did not expect this at all either. But now I'm really looking forward to seeing the kinds of things that they will do together with the infrastructure that Airtel has already done, but also with the ease of satellite connectivity. So yeah, very interesting move.
I agree with you there. Both companies are in various countries in Africa, and I believe they would work together based on the infrastructure they already have set up, the licenses they already have set up to complement each other. But what I'm very curious about is what product offerings would come from this collaboration. For example, with Airtel, does it mean in situations where they can use Starlink infrastructure to provide satellite internet, they would use that. And then maybe when it's cloudy and satellite isn't great, especially in regions like Port Harcourt that does have a lot of periods with rain. They switch back to their traditional setup. That would be an interesting setup for me, especially because I have talked about Starlink on the podcast, and I have said I'm not really moved at the moment because a lot of the time it can be cloudy where I am based. So, and then the fact that the solution isn't mobile also is a consideration that I think about. But with Airtel is mobile. So what does that mean for connectivity? So I'm quite interested in seeing what product offerings come out of this. And yeah, maybe I would get an Airtel SIM in the near future. But yeah, let's see how that goes.
Wow, that's a very interesting way of looking at it. Absolutely, 100%. So we talked about funding a couple of, I think, weeks ago, probably a month, I'm not sure. But we talked about funding, and when we talked about it, I think Nigeria was leading the pack. So we've kind of been bumped out of the way. We're seeing, first of all, African startup funding is going back up in April after having a very slow month in March. In March, we saw a slump in terms of funding for startups in Africa, but that has gone back up in April, and we're seeing that Egypt and South Africa are taking the lead. They had some very interesting startups coming in and getting some money, and most of them were getting funding of $100,000 and above. So very interesting times. I think even as we have been talking about startups and their growth in Africa over the last few weeks, we are seeing a kind of growth in the economy and in the market for them.
We talk about the big four startup destinations, startup countries in Africa, being Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, and South Africa. And most of the time, we talk a lot about Nigeria, we talk a lot about Kenya, but we have the other two countries, South Africa and Egypt. And in April, of course, they came in strong. Their startups are raising a lot of money. And I said it previously on the podcast, Egypt is a quiet one. We don't hear too much from the region, but when you do hear, it's always massive deals. For example, this company, Bokra, an Egyptian Islamic fintech platform, raised $59 million. This is just a year after they raised $4.6 million for a pre-seed funding round. So first of all, that's a very large pre-seed funding round, and then the very next round, $59 million. In Egypt, they have all of these massive deals that go on there, and we are also seeing South Africa with mergers and acquisitions raising 100 plus million. So these two countries carried the funding in April, and we are now seeing the funding is back up on the rise. Hopefully, the other regions, Kenya and Nigeria, will pick up our slack in May. Well, beyond that, I know it's always exciting to report about funding and raising money and all of that, but at the end of the day, it's about creating sustainable solutions for the continent. So I hope beyond the funding, beyond the very nice press headlines, we are building sustainable solutions.
So I'm really sad because I'm seeing that in 2024, Kenya was leading. We had $638 million raised, which was 29% of the continent's total. But it seems that we've been kind of subdued this month. And I think the fact that the funding is going back up means that there's investor confidence in the continent. And I think it's coming from us seeing more and more startups doing well. We started with MoneyPoint. Now we're seeing PalmPay. And I think there are very many other startups that are building sustainable businesses from the funding that they're getting. And the more that happens, the more we will see investor confidence. This is a good indication that if you have a good plan and you understand the market, then it is possible for you to get funding for your startup and to grow. But even as you are looking for funding, it's important for you to think about sustainability beyond just the funding, as Kevin is saying, because I think there is some sense of collective responsibility by knowing that you succeeding is opening doors for other startup founders that are in the process of innovating.
I agree with that. Yes, we do need investments. Investments help to also scale, but let's focus on building the right solutions that we need. And yeah, wishing every founder, every startup team out there the best of luck. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Tech Tides Africa podcast. Remember, leave a comment or share with your friends. We'll see you next Thursday at the same time and place you get your podcast. Until then, stay well.